Let's open up our Bibles this morning. We're going to go to Mark chapter 1 on page 995. And as you turn there, we will read again. Maybe you have it memorized by now. Matthew 11, 28 through 30, where Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you what? Rest. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find," there's that word again, "rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Last week we spoke about interruptions and how God uses interruptions in our lives to get our attention, to help us join Him in what He's doing, and also how interruptions in life can reveal things in our heart. And we talked about the two important responses to interruptions is that we would create margin in our lives and be present. Oh, thank God for Patrick. I have the notes from last week. I can run it back again if you want, but create margin and be present. And so today as we look more at Jesus and we're trying to learn from Jesus how to have peace and rest and not be hurried or busy or frantic or anxious or crazy or wild or all the stuff that we typically bring to the table. We're going to talk a little bit about limits. Mark chapter 1, verse 28. We've read this a few weeks now as well. Verse 28, "Immediately the news about him spread everywhere into all the surrounding district of Galilee." Jesus had just healed many people that were demon-possessed. In verse 29, "And immediately after they came out of the synagogue, they came to the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was lying sick with a fever, and immediately they spoke to Jesus about her. And he came to her and raised her up, taking her by the hand, and the fever left her, and then she waited on him." So Jesus, his ministry is expanding. People are looking for him. He's traveling from place to place. And he goes to Simon, who's also called Peter's mother-in-law's house. I mean, Peter must have been some kind of guy to ask for a miracle for his mother-in-law. I mean...
Watch it.
My mother-in-law is in the room this morning, so I can sympathize with that, the importance of that relationship. Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law from the fever, and she gets back up. It's awesome. Verse 32, "When evening came, after the sun had set, they began bringing to him all who were ill and those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city had gathered at the door." This is when it's nighttime, as things are seemingly slowing down. They don't have electricity. They're not staying up all night. But his day is so full that even now, with evening coming, the whole town comes to him. And what does he do? Verse 34, "He healed many who were ill with various diseases, cast out many demons, and he was not permitting the demons to speak because they knew who he was." And here's one of these verses we've looked at. So cool. Verse 35, "Then early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, went away to a secluded place, and was praying there. Simon and his companions searched for him. They found him and said to him, 'Everyone is looking for you.' Verse 38, he said to him, 'Let us go somewhere else to the towns nearby so that I may preach there also, for that is what I came for.'" So again, little picture into Jesus' life and his pace and his interaction with people and his days being full, right? Heals somebody, moves to a new town. Everybody knows that he's there. Everybody comes out to be healed by him, to hear him preach. He goes to Simon's house, spends some one-on-one time, heals Simon's mother-in-law. And then while it's still night, people are knocking at the door, "Jesus." And the whole town has come out to be healed. And it says that Jesus didn't say, "Sorry, healing hours are over." He healed them and delivered many of them. At some point, he goes to sleep. And then early in the morning, while it was still dark, he got up, went, and prayed and spent that time with his Father in this secluded place. Then people are looking for him, right? Are you stressed yet? I mean, come on. They're looking for him, and interesting, in light of what we've seen so far in this pattern, what he says is, "Let's go somewhere else." So, what we can glean from this is that Jesus, in the town that he was in, where Peter's mother-in-law was, did not heal everyone. He didn't deliver everyone that was oppressed, but he did a lot of it, and then he went to another town. And then from there, he went to another town, and it says that is why he came. So Jesus, in his ministry, you can see over and over again that he didn't heal everyone, and that he didn't do everything that he could have done. Now that may sound strange to us, because we think about how much he did do. But there were still people left in cities that weren't healed after Jesus passed by. And yet, at the end of Jesus' ministry, he said this. John 17, verse 4, he prays to his Father and says, I brought glory to you here on the earth by completing the work you gave me to do. So there may have been people that were not healed or delivered while Jesus was walking through Galilee and walking through the villages that he was in. But you know what? At the end of Jesus' life, he had done everything that his Father had wanted him to do. So what we see in Jesus' life is, though he had a full life, did a lot of things, there were limits to what he did or did not do. His main objective was to do the will of his Father. And so there were going to be things left undone. And there were going to be things that would draw him to one place or to the next. But Jesus had limits on his life. And you know what? He was at peace with the limitations. John 5:30, he says, I can do nothing on my own initiative. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just because I do not seek my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Jesus was about his Father's business. John 8:28 and 29 says, Jesus said, when you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he. And I do nothing on my own initiative, but I speak the things that the Father taught me. And he who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to him. And so what that means is there may have been things in the city of Capernaum that would have been pleasing to Mr. and Mrs. Schmo, but might not have been the Father's will. And so you know what Jesus did? He didn't get stressed out. He didn't get anxiety. He didn't worry about it. He didn't go, I know, Peter, we're supposed to go, but over there's this one more person that I just want to talk to real quick. But you have these people over here. I know, but they're worried about me over here. I know, but I got to go over here and do this person and the fishes and the loaves thing and over here and right? Jesus lived within the limits that his Father had placed on his life. Go to Mark chapter 4. You maybe never have thought about that before. But we're learning from Jesus how to rest, how to find rest for our souls. And one of the things that we can adopt that our master and teacher had were to live within our limits. Mark chapter 4, page 999, verse 35. I love this record. So now we're in Mark 4. A lot has happened since Mark 1, where we just left. In verse 35, on that day when evening came, he said to them, let us go over to the other side. This is going to be the other side of the lake. Leaving the crowd. So there's a crowd there, and what does he do? He leaves the crowd. They took him along with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. Verse 38, Jesus himself was in the stern, what? Asleep on a cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we're going to die? Ah! And he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Hush, be still. And the wind died down and became perfectly calm. Jesus leaves a crowd and gets on a boat and falls asleep on a cushion in the middle of a storm. You want to be like Jesus? Take naps. You want me to just finish the sermon right there? We all go home. Jesus leaves a crowd with many needs, many things he could have done, many, decisions he could have made sure were genuine after his preaching of the gospel. But you know what? He left and went to the other side of the lake. And while he was there, he wasn't worried. He wasn't freaking out. He has a peace about him that he's able to sleep and rest likely because he knows on the other side of the river, on the other side of the lake, there's going to be more needs for him to meet. He takes the time, living within his limits, to sleep, to rest. He wasn't freaking out about all that he had left undone, or that he could have done differently, or that he shouldn't have done, or anything like that. He was living within his limits. And you know why he took a nap? Because he was tired. Jesus lived within his limitations. And so you and I as humans created in God's image have so much potential, but we also have limitations. And I know any of you that have lived in America since 1776 know that we have heard that we can be anything we want to be and do anything we want to do. And you go into your guidance counselor's office in high school and there's quotes from John Wooden, never give up, you're the best, look in the mirror, you're amazing, and every Disney movie is about completing our dreams. R. Kelly, before he got weird, saying, I believe I can fly, But the reality is we have limitations. I want you to repeat after me. I have limitations. We do. The word limit means something that bounds, restrains, or confines. Another definition is a point or level beyond which something does not or may not extend or pass. And when we think about limits, we probably initially think about negative things. There's a great sale at the grocery store, fine print, limit 1 per customer. Speed limits. You go to the store, you saw that there was this amazing sale, 99% off something. You get there and they say, I'm sorry, it was a limited time offer. Negative. But limits aren't just negative, they can be good. A fenced-in yard, if you have children or pets and live on a busy street, is a good thing. Speed limits around a big turn are good things. The straightaways don't need to be so rigid, but we can talk about that later. Even our bodies naturally have limits, right? My daughters and I went to a father-daughter dance last night, and they just gave them anything they wanted to eat. Chicken nuggets, unlimited chicken nuggets, and ice cream, and cookies, and cupcakes. Like, not just ice cream, it's ice cream and cookies and cupcakes. And so my daughters, Dad, of course you can. You can have whatever you want. We're at father-daughter dance. And they started eating it, and then you know what? I can't have any more of this. Their bodies were telling them that was enough. And they're like, can I have some water? Like, my kids have never asked for water. They're like, can I have some water? Right? We have limits, and it's okay. It's good. Here are some of our limits. Some of our limits include our bodies. We can only be at one place at a time. Some of us have stronger bodies or weaker bodies. Tom, will you advance it as I list them, please? We also have a limit of our minds. There are things that we know, and there are things that we don't know. There are some people who know more than you about things. We're limited by our giftings. Some of us have special giftings that other people don't have, and vice versa, right? Not all of us can do the same thing as far as serving God with the giftings that He's given us. We have the limit of our personalities and our emotional wiring. Some of you are introverts and extroverts. And that doesn't mean one's right or wrong. It's just the difference is some of us have an ability to handle responsibility or stress at different levels than other people. Our families of origin create limits for us. None of us start as adults with a blank slate. Some of us start with a leg up. Some of us start with a limp back. We have parent wounds or great parents. We have limits of our socioeconomic origins. Even in the land of opportunity, some of us have more or less opportunities than others. We have limits of our education and careers. If you dropped out of high school, that's a limitation. If you have a PhD from Harvard, in a strange way, that's a limitation too, because the hours involved in you keeping your job or earning that PhD is a limitation. And then, of course, our seasons of life and their responsibilities. You have different limitations if you're 18 years old, a senior in high school, or in college. You have limitations if you have children or don't, how many children, their ages. Maybe some of you are caring for aged parents, married, single. These are all limitations. And those things and anything else we add to the list, those are just facts. But they're also a part of who God has shaped us to be. And so when we forget or try to blow by our limitations, we're in trouble. And this is really important for us to understand. If you and I try to live our lives without limits, ultimately what we're trying to do is be like God. Genesis 3 tells us this story. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, "Indeed, has God said, you shall not eat from any tree of the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "From the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat from it or touch it, or you will die." Now that's a limitation, right? God created everything. He gave them everything to enjoy, be fruitful and multiply. Don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a limitation, a good one. It helped them have a love-based relationship based on choice and honor. That was a limitation that they had. But then notice what the serpent says to Eve. He says this, "The serpent said to the woman, you surely will not die, for God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be open." And what does it say? "And you will be like God, knowing good and evil." The serpent's temptation was for humans to live outside of their limitations and be like God. Let me say that again. The serpent's temptation was for humans to live outside of their limitations and try to be like God. And in case you needed a reminder this morning, I've got 3 ways that you're not like God. God never gets weary or tired. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, creator of the ends of the earth, does not become weary or tired. You're not God. I'm not either. That happens to me all the time. God never sleeps nor slumbers. That should be, not more slumbers. God never sleeps nor slumbers. Psalm 121 verse 4 says, "He who watches over Israel never sleeps or never slumbers or sleeps." God doesn't need to sleep. Some of you are sleeping right now. God can do it all. Jeremiah 32:17, Lord God, behold, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and by your outstretched arm. Nothing is too difficult for you. What a phrase. Nothing is too difficult for you. There's all sorts of things that are too difficult for me. But the serpent's temptation, the devil's temptation, our flesh, our human evil craving and desires temptation is to make us forget and think that we don't have limitations. Some of you are living a pace as if you never grow weary or tired. You start getting weary and tired, you push through it and keep going, you burn yourself out, you get sick. Some of you don't sleep. It's not because you're worried or you're having health problems. It's just you don't make the time to sleep because you have so much to do. You have to stay up late, wake up early, because you got so much to do. You don't sleep, you don't slumber. You don't take a nap with a cushion. You can't do that. Yeah, maybe when I was 18 I could do it a little bit better, but even on those days that I pulled all-nighters in college, after the final was over, you know what happened? That was a real-life reenactment. That's what it was. Some of you think that you can do it all. That nothing is too difficult for you. But that's not true. You know who that's true about? Only God. And He's omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent too. You're not. I'm not. Sometimes the stress in our life is because we are trying to pursue one or all of the things that our bodies, minds, and emotions can't handle. And our bodies are saying it's not possible, but we push through that limit. And so we're stressed, we're anxious, we're irritable, we're grumpy, we're tired, we're sick. Because God has given us a gift called limits, and we try to live outside of them. This is a good way to say it. This is by a woman named Jackie Hill Perry. Tell me when you're ready, Ken.
We are like Eve in that we are dissatisfied with being who we were made to be. We were made by God, Colossians 1:16, for God. We are a created thing. But sin wants us to get beyond what we were made to be, but we can't. And it frustrates us that we can't be more than human. I think that's actually the appeal of being busy. You know, it's cute for people to say, I'm busy and I'm booked, whatever. I think that's part of the appeal of being busy, because we want to be able to do a million things at the same time and preserve our peace, but only God can do that. You have people looking into horoscopes and going to psychics because they want to know the future while living in the present, but only God can do that. Even social media makes us feel like we have access into the lives of thousands of people without having to ask for their permission like God. But even then, we still can't see everything. And with everything that we do see, we're not able to discern what's really real. Social media has given us a way to mimic omniscience. But even then, look at what all this information is actually doing to us. It's creating discontentment, jealousy, envy. God don't deal with that. We want so desperately to be like God, but we can't be. And that's okay. Because once we begin to reckon and be content with our position as a created thing, we will actually free ourselves from the anxiety of having to be something that we were never meant to be.
Praise God. Isn't that good? Right? So, we have limits. What do we do about that? Well, in other areas of our life, if we have a limited supply of something, we have to figure out how to steward what we have. For example, money. All of us only have so much money. Say amen to that, right? We only have so much money, and you and I need to make intentional decisions with what we do with each dollar, and we get into trouble when we don't. I get my paycheck, deposit it. First thing I need to do is I need to take out that tithe, because I'll find something to do with that real quick if I don't. Next thing I need to do, pay the rent, pay the mortgage soon, praise God, and then the utilities, and then food. And I don't mean like going out to eat food, I mean like grocery food. And then I've got some left. And I've got a few bills I got to pay. And yes, I want to have a good time and fun and stuff like that. But if I turn that upside down and start with, every time I get paid, it's, hey! Guess what? I'm going to be evicted, right? My family's going to be hungry and leave me. The same is true with our time. We only have so much. You have to make intentional decisions with what you do with each minute, and we get into trouble when we don't. So the solution, as John Mark Comer says, the solution to an overbusy life is not more time. It's to slow down and simplify our lives around what really matters. So we read this last week, Ephesians 5:15 through 16. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise but wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. I think King James says, redeeming the time. You and I only have so much time. We have to decide what we're going to use our time for. And I would suggest that we start to prioritize the important things over the unimportant things. We have to determine what is important in our lives. And after we recognize what's important, maybe we'll have some time left over. The first question we have to ask is, what are the most important things in your life as a disciple of Jesus? Anybody ever been to the parts of Pennsylvania where the Amish live? Yes. Right? Pretty cool to see that, right? And the Amish get a bad rap, you know? Some of us may think like they're crazy. Some of us may envy the Amish, right? But the idea of the Amish, we think about the Amish, is that they don't have any technology. No electricity, no nothing. They're living in like the 1400s, not even like the 1800s, right? But the reality of it is, the Amish are not against all technology. What they do is they evaluate modern things in light of their value system. And the most important thing to the Amish community is their relationship with God. It's a Christian community. And then the community that they have with each other. Those are the two guiding principles. How interesting. Love God, love your neighbor. That's their priority. And so what they do is, rather than just welcoming every piece of technology or modernity that comes their way, like I do, without asking what risk it might have upon my life, what they do is they get together as a community and they say, okay, the tractor was invented. Is this tractor going to help us love God more or less? And what's it going to do to our community life? Because that's the most important thing for us. And you know what? If you go to Amish country in Pennsylvania, you know what you'll see? Tractors. You know why? Because they determined that if they can plow the field a little quicker, they can be together a little longer. They don't have cars, typically. And the reason why is because the community got together and they said, the car was invented. Ooh, this is nice. It could help us like this, it could help us like this. But you know what? We're concerned that if we got cars, we might drive away and spread out as a community. And that would affect our important value of loving God and loving each other and being united as a community. So you know what? No car. We'll take a horse and buggy. As I study about this, I found out that a lot of Amish people have washing machines. And thus electricity to power the washing machine. Didn't you think they were just like on the on the washboard with a bucket? No, they have washing machines. You know why? Because their high value of loving God and loving each other. If they can get the laundry done and quicker and spend more time with each other, great. Isn't that interesting? Phones? I don't know. A lot of them have a payphone somewhere nearby. They don't all have cell phones, that's for sure. They've evaluated their decisions based on their priorities, knowing that they have limitations. So, you and I need to, in our lives, because we have limits, start with what is most important first. And so I'm going to illustrate this. Some of you may have seen this before. This is inspired by a man named Stephen Covey. He's got like the 7 highly effective, 7 highly effective 7 rules of 7. He's got a bunch. He's got a lot of books. All right. Tell your neighbor while I'm doing this, hey, you got limits too. All right. This is your life. Say hi, life. Hi. This is your life. You have limitations, and so do I. There's only so much that can fit in this container. And so what most of us do is we allow, this is sand, we allow the things in our life that aren't really that important, but they're right in our face. Sorry, cleaning crew, we'll sort this out here. Right? We allow, just busyness and small, these sand grains are not that big, right? Little insignificant things, but we fill up our lives with things first that aren't important. And so then we have these rocks. These represent the important things in our life. Relationship with God, relationships with others, following Jesus, working your job well. And so then what we do is, after our lives are full of this extra stuff, we start putting this stuff in here, right? Got to put our relationship with God in there, right? Okay. Is this person married? Yeah, we're going to put in the spouse right there, put it in delicately and gently and do all that. Kids, got to put time for the kids, okay? And then let's see, serving in the church, that'll go in there. Let's see, prayer, okay? Prayer, we'll get that in there. But there's a problem, isn't there? What's the problem? The problem is I've already let me put it in a different way. Let me try, that's not going to work either. So you know what? There's problems. I've filled my life with things that aren't the most important. They might be the loudest. They might be the most trendy or what everyone else is doing in my community or in my family or, all that. We fill it up with this. And then you know what? We run out of room for the important stuff. This is the way most of us live. And so then, quality time with our kids, there's no room. There's no room. We live outside of our limits. There's no room for the important things because we fill it up the wrong way. So let's try this. Let's try something else here. Let's see if maybe as followers of Jesus, instead of filling our lives with the temporal things of this. Did I say how much I love my mother-in-law who leads the cleaning crew actually in our church? Hey, life is short, people. You never know. Okay. Let's try this. I barely fit enough rocks in this life of mine, but I'm going to try something different. I'm going to put in my relationship with God. I'm going to put in my relationship with my wife. I'm going to put in my relationship with the kids. I'm going to put in quiet time. I'm going to put in, friendships. I'm going to put in working hard at my job. I'm going to put in managing my money well. I'm going to put in resting and Sabbathing and not being so busy and overwhelmed in my life. I'm going to take, hey, this is a concept, spending time on my physical health. And then this is some other important thing that maybe you know in your life. And what do you know? They all fit. And then watch this. I have this other bowl here that I didn't tell you about because you have coworkers. The coworkers can go in there. How about your neighbors? How about, getting involved in something that's extra, right? Or spending time with your neighbors or someone at school. Look how much is suddenly being able to. I didn't even put these rocks in the other one. And then I've got so much of this sand to try to fill in somewhere. And look, there's still room. There's still room for these things, for the sand. If this was nice and dry, sandbox sand, it would flow down there to the bottom. But it's wet New England beach sand, and it just doesn't do that, okay? But look at this. Look at that. Look at that. I'm able to put this stuff right. Oh, you want to be on Facebook? Okay, there's a little time for that. You want to play games? There's a little time for that. You want to be a sports fan? There's a little time for that. And look what happens. I can actually close it. Because I put the important things in first. We have to prioritize our lives and start putting in the very limited amount of time that we have as human beings before Jesus returns. We have to prioritize the important things. Your relationship with God, your relationship with others, right? Being a good neighbor, being a good child or son or all the rest. That has to go into our lives first. And if we put it in first, if we prioritize that, if I'm taking the tithe out right away, right? If I'm waking up in the morning, instead of going on my phone, instead of turning on the TV, I'm seeking God in prayer and reading the Bible. If I'm putting that in first, there's going to be room for these other things too. But if we do it the other way, it's not going to work. You and I are limited creatures, and that's the way God created us. And if we start thinking otherwise, that these limits don't apply to us, we're committing the first and greatest sin, thinking that we're like God. Start with what is most important and see what room is left for anything else. And so one final thing. God can work in supernatural ways through our limitations. If we recognize that we have limits, it is good because it allows us room to trust and rely on God's power. But if we're too busy living outside of our limitations, why do we need God's help? Why do we even need God's help if we're just doing it all ourselves? But if we recognize our limit, there's room to see God work in us because we don't have what it takes. We do grow weary and tired. We do sleep and slumber. We can't do it all. And so then we put our lives in the right priority and we see how God can work through broken and limited people who don't try to do it all, but try to rely on Him. So let's pray. As we get quiet now and end our time, I want you to ask God to show you where you are living outside of your limitations. God, show us where we're living outside of our limitations. Ask God to help you recognize the things that need to go in first. What needs to go in your limited life first? So we recognize maybe where we're limited. We recognize what is important, but we need help. And so Jesus says to us again this morning, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me how to live your life. Learn from me how to prioritize your life. I'm gentle, I'm humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light."